the Premier announced earlier this week, we have updated the COVID-19 regulations. The changes took effect today. As a reminder for the public, here's what's now in place. After consultation with the Ministry of Health, the following changes have been agreed. Group gatherings of persons in a private or public setting will increase from a maximum of 10 to a maximum of 25. This also includes outdoor funerals. However, there will be no large gathering exemptions approved at this time. Changes to the regulations also cover indoor bars and nightclubs. Indoor bars, but at table service only, with a maximum of 6 at a table. No bar service will be in 2 weeks. Yesterday, we had some encouraging news from the Ministry of Health that there were 0 positive COVID infections. After a terrible outbreak of the coronavirus in our community last November, we are now seeing the benefits of the implementation of the necessary restrictions that were put in place just before the holidays. The compliance of the community is why we are starting to see the lower numbers of infections. And it's thanks to these collective efforts that we can make these modifications to the regulations. As a reminder, we continue to be remain in place between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m., with businesses closing at 11 p.m. In that regard, we must ensure that the community's compliance of the updated COVID-19 regulations. To aid in that, the Bermuda Police Service's COVID compliance team continued to be active in visiting various businesses, bars, and restaurants to ensure that patrons and establishments are engaging in the appropriate health and safety protocols. They're also checking to ensure that businesses and patrons are complying with the current curfew. So, we want to remind the public that if you intend to be out and about in the evening hours, please plan ahead by ensuring you have enough time to get home before the midnight curfew. The BPS's COVID compliance team, in partnership with the Bermuda Reserve Police, will be monitoring the curfew points. They will also be out on the roads to ensure the safety of the motoring public. I did want to provide a brief update from the BPS on the curfew breaches. In total, there have been 34 breaches since December 18, 2020. The breakdown per parish is as follows: 1 for Sandys, 1 Southampton, 3 Warwick, 11 Paget, 7 Pembroke, 3 Devonshire, 3 Hamilton, 1 Smiths, and 2 St. George's. The gender breakdown is 19 males and 15 females. Currently, there are 5 persons who have been approved for charges by the Department of Public Prosecutions, and 27 are still pending. Lastly, as always, I wish to encourage our community to exercise personal responsibility and common sense. Please continue to keep your family and your friend bubbles small. Please continue to follow health guidelines to protect you and your families. Please refrain from hosting events more than the allotted group numbers. Please practice physical distancing, proper hand hygiene, and wear a mask when in public spaces and places. And if you're in attendance at any establishment or location around the island and see any breaches of the COVID-19 regulations by persons or businesses, please do not hesitate to call 211 to report violations. As I close, I wish to thank the community for all their cooperation and continue to encourage vigilance to protect you and your loved ones. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. I want to open today by stating that this government and my ministry are deeply committed to sport. Sport is considered one of the bedrocks of our community, and we fully recognize and embrace the critical role that sport plays for the social, physical, mental, and emotional well-being of all Bermudians. Likewise, we understand that the necessary restrictions and the limits imposed by COVID-19 have dealt a significant blow to the sporting community, and we certainly appreciate everyone's patience, everyone's collaboration as we battle through this pandemic to keep our people and our economy safe and open. Indeed, by all the measures that we are performing significantly better than most jurisdictions. I think today that we have much to be proud of in this regard, and the collaboration of the supporting community and the national sporting governing bodies have been essential to our success. During these difficult times, most of us would understand that our normal activities have been curtailed or suspended due to COVID-19. This includes our recreational sporting activities and our national sporting events. Sport creates outlets for stress and anxiety, which is important for our overall well-being, and they engender national pride to keep us united as a people. Admittedly, we have missed the routine of attending and engaging in regular scheduled sporting activities during this time. With that in mind, I can tell you today that the Ministry of Youth, Culture, and Sport has released the Return to Play guidance to enable the safe and gradual resumption of local sporting activities. The Department of Youth, Sport, and Recreation, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, as well as the Ministry of National Security and the Association of National Sport Governing Bodies, has created a phased return to play guidance for sports as a way to assist in safely resuming these national activities. The document has 4 easy-to-follow stages and outlines the various health and safety protocols for governing sports bodies, affiliating clubs, teams, and sporting events. Those stages are: Stage 1, non-competitive training for exercise and technical development. Stage 2, team training with restrictions. Stage 3, competitive training to prepare for competition. And lastly, Stage 4, return to play. Importantly, we have to mention that each stage has COVID-related restrictions with respect to the number of persons that can be present, as well as attendance requirements. Moving to each stage is guided by the Ministry of Health assessment of the country's COVID-19 situation and will be determined by the Cabinet and announced via the government COVID-19 webpage. We all know that athletes are used to following the rules, and having to follow those rules are an important part of the progress that we have enjoyed thus far. So following and playing within COVID rules and adhering to the guidance for this group will allow us to safely proceed to competitive play in the not-so-distant future. I can describe the stages a little more fully. Stage 1. That finished yesterday. That involved non-competitive training for exercise and technical development. It was limited to a maximum persons of 10 and did not allow any close contact for fans. Stage 2, that's team training. That starts today, as the COVID emergency measures were relaxed as of 6 a.m. this morning. This stage allows the return to team training in groups of up to 25. There cannot be any contact during exercise or technical development activities, and there cannot be any fans during this stage. There must be at least 6 feet between participants at all times. Wearing masks is required except when during activity, and new groups should arrive at least 30 minutes to allow for the cleaning, dismemberment, or setting up of equipment after the previous group has vacated the venue. Stage 3, that will be competitive training to prepare for competition. This can be expected to start in 2 or more weeks, depending on how we do with COVID-19 situation as a country. If we continue to do well, as we have already been, then we can look forward to this stage in the near future. Stage 3 will allow us full training to prepare for competition. Fans are not allowed at this time. There can be no competitive competitions allowed. That will be team versus team or clubs versus clubs or groups at this time. Significantly, we need to mention that this stage will also require officials as well as athletes and participants to have had a negative COVID saliva test, taken not more than 3 days before training. This screening process will help us to ensure that everyone who's taking part in high-risk activity has a lesser risk of transmitting or contracting COVID-19, and said tests will have to be repeated every 28 to 30 days. Participants will still be required to remain 6 feet apart and wear a mask at all times, except when those are engaged in physical training. There will still be a 30-minute separation between the groups to allow for the cleansing of equipment, etc. Finally, stage 4. That will be return to play. This will allow all sports to compete and participate within the allowed COVID-19 restrictions per the public health regulations and guidance. Fans will be permitted at this stage, but with COVID-19 restrictions, including, of course, keeping 6 feet separation and wearing masks at all times. The maximum number of persons allowed at the venues will be guided by the advice of the health department, depending on the venue and its size. Persons that participate in public sporting events shall, where possible, please remain in their sport bubble and remain from gathering in large public events. Return to play plans must be submitted to the sports development officer. Where applicable, site visits will be made if necessary. Applications that have more than the permitted number of persons attending an event should be made to the Minister of National Security by completing the online form titled Exemption Mass Gatherings or emailing emogroup@gov.bm. There are more details about the guidelines in the document, and that can be found on the government COVID-19 webpage. And I certainly invite and encourage all of us to read these carefully to ensure full compliance with the requirements so that we can have a very safe return to play. Overall, I would like to highlight that the phased return to play guidelines, our current and applicable COVID-19 laws still apply. Consequently, should anyone test positive within a team or bubble, all close contacts will be required to quarantine and get tested. I certainly want to elaborate today my appreciation for everyone's collaboration as well as their patience to date. I know we all share the concern for safety first, and as responsible citizens and as well as sports people, I know that we will do everything within our power to follow the rules to keep ourselves, our families, and our community safe. Sport can be a great equalizer in any community, and return to play guidance acknowledges the importance of sport while still mitigating the risk that comes with a COVID-19 environment. My ministry is pleased to do its part in helping our community find enjoyment through safe attending and participating in sports once again. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Let's remain focused on doing what is right so that we can bring sport and recreation back. We invite and encourage the community to review the information, the Return to Play document, which can be found on the government portal, www.gov.bm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ministers, for your presentation. Members of the media, it's the time for questions. We're going to have Earl Baisden start us off from Island Stats. Mr. Baisden?
Good afternoon. First question would be, how did we come up with a number of 25? Does COVID tell you 25, or how did we come up with a 25 number?
That number was the number that was suggested by the Ministry of Health. So they used the data and the science that's presented to them. So the large gathering number was increased from 10 to 25 this week as
Okay.
a result of that.
Cool. All right. To Minister Peets. Obviously, the document that is released talks about team sports. What about the individual sport that is out there that has to abide by a team sport regulation?
Yeah, these guidelines, of course, are for all sports. So these are the guardrails, if you will, sort of to keep everyone sort of in the same operation as relates to guidelines and rules. For individual sports, my suggestion would be is to submit a plan to the contact person at Youth Sport and Recreation to handle any specific issues or questions regarding that particular individual sport. But this document here is actually the basic guidelines that we want all of our sporting bodies to follow.
Some of the wordage in there, when you said stage 3 requires a negative test, but I noted that it was missing in stage 4. So if someone decides not to do part of stage 3, when we go to stage 4, what do they need to do? Because it doesn't say in there that you have to have a negative test to go to stage 4.
Yeah, thank you for
Part of
pointing that
stage
out. In stage 3, of course, as we've stated, that the negative saliva test is required, and it also states that every 28 to 38 days. So just as a repetitive sort of thing, every 28 days you're taking the test, even if you're in phase number 4.
Okay. And finally, what is the recourse for getting the vaccine? If someone has the vaccine, does that negate getting the saliva test?
Yes.
So once you have the vaccine, and then how does one then prove they have or have not taken the test? Because isn't it private if you've tested?
Yes, so we certainly understand that the medical information is private. So the ministry and the department is not necessarily trying to infringe on people's privacy rights. The only thing that we are interested in is 2 things. One, that we're ensuring that individuals are being tested. That's the best way to keep the country safe. We certainly don't want another outbreak. The other is that if there is a positive test, having that knowledge early helps us to contain that particular issue so that we can notify the rest of the sports bubble, get them tested so that we can protect the rest of the sporting bodies in the country.
There's no secret in mid-March, we're expecting an influx of people to come to competitive train for an event at the end of April. Some of the stuff that I've seen that they have as protocol, I see in ours, is the document kind of marrying the same, that they're going to be in a bubble. They can afford to be in a bubble, but we're coming from an amateur standpoint, creating that. How do we know that if you get tested negative and then you show up to work and you're in contact with someone who works in government that hasn't been tested, you don't know that until the 28th or the 30th of the next month. So my question would be, if sports are being required to test, why isn't, I could be working next to somebody who doesn't do sports and they're tested positive but don't know because they haven't been tested. So sports being singled out for being tested as opposed to everyone.
Yeah, we've heard those comments before. I could certainly answer that. Sports is not being targeted. We certainly want to keep people safe. So we want to keep that as our top priority. But there are other segments of the community that are also required to be tested, whether you're in a hotel or bars or restaurant, health officials. If you want to travel, for example, you're going to have to be tested. So testing is a major part of the process to help us control this pandemic. And we've been doing a really, really good job so far, at least better than some other jurisdictions. And having said that, with no positive cases indicated yesterday, I would suggest, these strategies are working. So I'm really encouraging everyone to keep doing what we're doing so that we can get back to play as quickly as possible.
And has the government figured out somewhere where athletes can go to be tested as opposed to mingling with the general public? Because when you start talking about sports, you're talking about thousands of people.
Yep.
Has it come up with a design of where these athletes can go and get in touch with the sporting bodies?
Yeah, we certainly can give assurance to all of the athletes and sporting bodies out there. The government has the capacity for testing. So the mechanism for testing is available. There will be information communicated to them on where they can go to get the test and register for the testing.
And my final question would be, in the stages that we're in, are there some sports that can actually go to stage 4 currently in stage 2? The government's in stage 2, but because of their sport, through youth and sport, they can actually move to stage 4?
Well, this particular document doesn't necessarily prohibit that. What is required, of course, is for that particular sport to submit their plan to the department, and those individual questions and concerns will be able to be ironed out.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Basden, for those thorough questions. Do we have any other questions for members of the media? Mr. Trott, Tarai Trott from, we'll do Lawrence Trott first, and then Mr. Trott from the Bermuda Broadcasting following Mr. Lawrence Trott from the Royal Gazette.
Good afternoon, Sports Minister.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you.
The question, I think the sport that comes to mind that people want to know when it's going to be able to start is football. If you're talking about a maximum of 25 at this present time,
Yes.
obviously the numbers going to have to increase before we can get back to playing football. Do you have any idea when that might be?
I wish I could put a date on the calendar. Trust me, I wish I could. But such a date cannot be necessarily predicted. I can tell you we are closer today than we were before. We're certainly trending in the right direction. So theoretically, for example, if we continue to trend the way that we're trending with our COVID response, we can move into the next stage in 2 weeks. And if that continues, in another 2 weeks, perhaps stage 4. But that really all depends on how we're handling the pandemic as a country, which requires all of us to participate in order to make that happen.
So you've been in regular contact with the BFA in terms of when they can possibly start, or the fact that because I'm sure they're concerned about being able to restart and then finish their season.
Yes. Yeah, so the conversations are ongoing. So right now I would imagine that the Bermuda Football Association is aware of what games were missed due to the breakout last year in December. There are a number of cup games, of course, that were also missed. So they're probably busy as we speak, roughing out a calendar for the resumption of play.
Could it be possible that football will start with no fans? Is that a possibility? I mean, could we just have just the players and the officials at the games and no fans at all? Is that a likelihood?
Well, the way the guidelines are written for stage number 4, the fans will be allowed per the guidelines, which is 6 feet and mask. But of course, that depends on the venue, and also depends on where we are as COVID.
Right.
But that will be a great day if we can ever get there, to hear the whistle blow and see sports resuming on the field of play and fans back in the stands.
Right. Now, we're talking about fans, and we're talking about crowds, and we're talking about a popular event like the Bermuda Day half marathon. Are we looking that far? Have we talked about possibilities with that as well? Because we're talking about thousands of people, several hundred participants.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood of that happening?
Yeah, we're certainly aware of the calendar events. Everyone knows that May is Heritage Month. So the Department of Culture right now is busy making plans for that. The word that we can use at the moment is Heritage Month will be reimagined. So we can only plan for Heritage Month based on our current circumstances. But yes, that conversation right now is ongoing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence Trott from the Royal Gazette Sports section. And now we have Mr. Tarai Trott from the Bermuda Broadcasting Company. Tarai, do you have any questions for either of our ministers this afternoon?
Good day. National Security Minister, can you give us any indication as to when this overnight curfew will be ended? Is there any criteria the government is relying on before it makes that decision?
Well, as we stated in the statement, that we will review it in 2 weeks' time. I think that we are pleased with the trending that we see right now, Tarai, and it's many factors as to why we even would have kept the curfew going, based on one, health information, and in some cases we have resources as well, where we have persons that are now being involved in vaccination who would have been involved in the contact tracing and things like that should we have an outbreak. So we are happy with the fact that we seem to be trending downwards in terms of our positive cases, but we are also cautious as well.
Thank you, Minister.
Right. If there are no more questions, thank you, members of the media, for attending today's press briefing. That concludes our press conference today. Thank you all for joining us.